Hello, and welcome to The Art of Being Human. I'm going to start out with some interesting statistics about suicide. And just to kind of give you some insight as to when it happens, how it happens, and all of that. Most attempt suicide from noon to 6 p.m. I don't know why this is, but this is what the statistics tell us. Most people, if they're going to attempt suicide, they do it from noon to 6 p.m. Men use more lethal methods, such as guns. Women use less lethal methods, such as pills, but women also make more attempts than men do. And it is the second leading cause of death among teens. It is the 10th leading cause of death among people in general, not just teens, but everybody. And suicide increases, and this is the scary part, it increases 400% per year. And I think one of the problems is that it has become a coping skill. In other words, if you don't feel well and you don't see any way out of your problems, and you think those problems are going to last forever, then the only skill that you think you can muster is to kill yourself and be out of those problems. It's absolutely the worst thing you can do, of course, but that's what people think, because suicide, once you decide to do it, once you're thinking about it seriously, everything revolves about what's going to lead up to the suicide. In other words, in a sense, you reject all of your normal relationships and concentrate on the suicide itself. It's on your mind most of the time. This is how you're going to do it. This is when you're going to do it. This is why you're going to do it. This will lead up to it. That won't. I've got to give this away. I've got to give that away. Now, why do people give things away before they commit suicide? Is they want to give their things that they care about good homes. And it's like they're wrapping things up before the end. They're taking care of all details so nothing is left undone before they make the attempt. So their favorite things are going to give to their favorite people. And so therefore that gives them a good home. You always need to watch. I mean, I don't think we need to look for suicide around every corner. I'm not that extreme about it. But if you have a favorite friend and they're giving things away, I'd be curious to know why they're doing it. Because they may not say, oh, I'm going to kill myself, I want to commit suicide, I don't want to live anymore. You may have an idea that maybe they're in trouble emotionally, and if they are, you should always ask them, because they want to talk about it. It doesn't cause anybody to commit suicide if you talk about it, but it actually decreases the percentage that will commit suicide if they have a chance to talk about it, because then they can get a better insight into it. Then you can kind of lead them in a different direction. But those are all kinds of things we'll be getting into. I do believe that all suicides leave clues and cues. Now, there are a group of people who will say, I didn't see it coming, and they probably didn't see it coming, and then they feel guilty. You should not feel guilty if one of your friends commits suicide. It's a sad thing, and grief is an important result of anything like that. Any kind of loss you have, you can get a grief reaction from it. But the thing is, you can't go looking for a person around every corner that's going to commit suicide. So some of the clues and cues that they leave may be pretty refined. Some of them are obvious, but some are not. So why would they leave cues and clues in terms of their upcoming death? It's because partly they haven't really totally decided to do it. And they're thinking about it, and they're leaning toward it, but their minds aren't definitely made up. And because their minds aren't definitely made up yet, they kind of hint around a little bit. And sometimes they don't even know they're leaving these clues. They don't realize that they're doing it. They think that they're being perfectly secretive, but you might notice changes in their behavior. They're not interested in the things they used to be interested in. They kind of seem distant and far-offish, if I can put it that way. They're giving things away. They're not paying that much attention to their health. The things that they used used to love to do, they're shying away from, like it's not important anymore. And what they are doing with all of that kind of behavior is they're sinking into themselves. And the outside world, which we all live in, isn't as important as it used to be, because all they're thinking is about, how do I prepare myself in order to die? And how do I do it? And how can I do it most comfortably? And what kind of a statement am I making if suddenly somebody finds me dead? And they're just, it's like they're in a closed system. Their branches to the outside world are being cut off by themselves, and they're thinking only of what happens to them if they should commit suicide, and how they're going to do it, and where they're going to do it, and why they're going to do it. But at the same time, there's a good percentage of them that really aren't totally committed. They're trying to become totally committed, but they're not totally committed. And this is the time you want to reach them. So if you see, and I'm going to list off what these clues are, if you see these clues and there's no explanation for them, it's worth talking to them about it. I've noticed that you don't go to dance classes anymore. I've noticed that you don't do your club work like you used to. You don't seem to be interested in outside activities. You're giving your things away. Are you going to hurt yourself? Are you thinking about doing something to yourself? Are you thinking about what life would be like for us if somehow you left? Are you thinking about leaving in some kind of way? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Now, I generally don't use the word suicide, but you certainly could. It wouldn't do any harm. Are you thinking about killing yourself? I usually say something else. I usually say, are you thinking about hurting yourself in some kind of way? Or doing something that would put your life at risk? You know, you could say something like that. That's not an offensive thing to say. And the thing is, even though you might say that'll push them along in the process, there is a process which we'll get into. But instead of thinking that it'll push them along in the process, it actually postpones the process. One of the things, if you know how a person is going to kill yourself and they have a process is set in mind, if you can interrupt that process, they probably won't kill themselves in another way. They'll start a process all over again. You know, if you stop them from jumping off the bridge, then they're not going to go the next day and jump off the bridge. They've been discovered. They're going to start all over in their plans. They're not going to just do something quickly, although there is such a thing as impulsive suicide. But for the most part, we're talking about the most part here, they will have to start all over in their process. But you've got to be able to recognize what those clues are, because they may well say and may well think that they're keeping this secret. So let's take a look at that. There are verbal clues that are very direct, that you can't miss. I want to kill myself. I am going to kill myself. Or something like, you'd be better off if I was gone. Now that's pretty direct. They intend it as an indirect statement, but it's really pretty direct. I think that you would be better off without me. I think that I'll probably not be around much longer. You know, little clues like that, those are verbal, direct cues. Now, you do have nonverbal cues, something that has to do with their behavior that's changed, in which they don't say anything directly at all. For example, they develop sleep problems. They don't sleep very well. So they might talk to you about the sleep problems. Now, I know a lot of people have insomnia. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're suicidal. But when you think about one thing all the time and that occupies all your attention, your sleep can get disrupted. They may talk about it. If a person does not fall asleep well, then a lot of times they're anxious. If a person falls asleep but then wakes up continually, a lot of times they're depressed. That's a little difference between anxiety and depression, the way that they sleep. So if they mention the fact that they don't sleep very well, it doesn't, one clue like that doesn't mean that they're suicidal. I know I have friends that have insomnia, I have it myself, but I wouldn't say to a person who says that, that they're insomniacs, I wouldn't say, oh, you're going to kill yourself. It may be just a medical condition. But that, in conjunction with a lot of other symptoms along with it that they don't particularly realize that they're letting you in on, that can be a sign. So if a person can't sleep well, it doesn't mean that they're going to kill themselves, and I wouldn't even ask the question. But if they're also withdrawing from normal life, giving their things away, making little hints like, you'd be better off without me, I won't be here much longer, things like that, you can put the two together and then you question them. You see, you have to have some kind of a sense about this. And of course, I think life gives you a sense about this when you know people are depressed enough that you think they might do something. And you are required by law to intervene. If I had somebody come to me and they said, I think that I'm going to do it, or, I'm not feeling well, and I just am not eating and I'm not sleeping, so I'm giving things away and things like that, I would ask them directly how they feel. And if they say they've been thinking about suicide, if they admit to that, and they may, of course they may not too, but if they are admitting to it, then it's up to you to do something to stop it. You are required to stop it if you possibly can. And how would you do it? Well, one, you can take them to the doctor. You can offer, well, why don't you let me take you to a doctor that can help you? Or why don't you go to the emergency room? If you want, I'll go with you. You don't really want to leave them alone much, because if you leave them alone, it gives them more chances to think and more time to think about what they want to do to themselves. You want to get them into a hospital situation where there will be somebody on call that will deal with them. You don't know who it's going to be, but most counseling centers have people that are on call. So if a suicidal crisis comes into an emergency room, they know exactly who to call, and then the person comes and they see the individual that's suicidal, talk with them, many times help them, and then set up appointments for them or give a referral to a psychiatrist. And so they get the help that they need. And the usual way that we tell people, if someone's suicidal and you know they're suicidal, they've admitted to it, take them to the emergency room of the hospital. And they will take it from there. Now you've done your part. If possible, stay with them. Don't leave them alone. Because, if they're with somebody, that's going to interfere with their plan. I think that what you want to do is interfere with their plan on how they're going to get rid of themselves. And sometimes you just don't know. If you don't know and the person passes on, it's not your fault. And don't accept guilt and don't accept responsibility for it, because it's not your fault. Each person has to be responsible for their own decisions. If you know something's up, then you intervene and you try to help out. As long as you've tried to help out and referred them to somebody who can help them, then you've done your part. It's not necessary for you to cure them. You can't cure them. What you have to do is get them to the point where they can get the help that they need. I know I've intervened in quite a few suicides, and I know I've done seminars on suicides in which people, and I wouldn't have known it, were actually considering doing it. And then when I finish the seminar, at some point they usually get back to me and say, I was going to do it and you stopped me. So that's really a good thing. You want to preserve life wherever you can. So nonverbal clues would include the sleep problems, which I just mentioned, change in eating habits, they don't eat or they eat too much, giving things away, important things, making a will. Now everybody should have a will, but sometimes it's done in conjunctions with a person's plan to kill themselves. And making the wills is actually another example of putting their house in order before they die, giving things away, and having a will if they don't have one, and doing what they can to kind of wrap up their life. And there can be a change of personal habits. That can be an indication too. A person who's normally clean and showers every day and takes care of themselves suddenly doesn't do that anymore. And they're slovenly, they don't take care of themselves, they don't look good, they don't bathe. All of this kind of thing can possibly be a sign, along with other signs. Now, what you have to remember is that it's the various signs together that are important. One sign by itself may not mean a lot. It may not mean anything at all. I give away some things and it's unusual for me to do that. That doesn't mean I'm suicidal. I may just be paring down. It could be a very normal thing. But if I give things away, make a will, tell people I can't sleep, and stop interacting with other people, which is what I normally would do, then something is obviously up. It could be that I'm ill. And not suicidal, but it could be that I'm ill and suicidal, or just plain suicidal. And you can always ask. And most people who are suicidal, if they don't want you to know, they'll say, oh no, or they'll deny it. But even that can be a clue. The way they say no can be a clue as to whether they're telling you the truth or not. If I were to go to a person because I thought they were suicidal and I just said, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of taking yourself away or doing something to yourself? And if they nonchalantly says, oh no, I wouldn't do that, and it's just very normal talk, then you can probably bet that they're telling the truth and be less concerned. But if they become very agitated when they say no, how can you ask me a question like that? How would I ever do a thing like that? I can't believe that you're asking me that. What are you thinking about? And they become very agitated when they say no. They're saying no, but they're saying it in a very emotional, agitated way. They may be saying no, but in their hearts, they're really saying yes. And that's the clue. You have to know how they act when you talk to them about it. Most people, if you ask them, it's a straightforward no, of course not. Or no, I'm not doing that. I'm thinking about moving and I'm giving some things away because I'm already planning this move or something. It can be very, very normal. The suicide person can act very, very normally under certain circumstances. So what you have to do is put the pieces together. If you don't put the pieces together, then you're apt to miss it. And then you feel guilty when you realize that you've missed it. But no matter how hard you do, no matter how hard you work at trying to help a person, there will be a time when you're not going to be able to help a person because no matter what you do, it's not going to be enough. But that's not your fault. Your fault is your responsibility is to do the best you can and get them the help that they need and offer your help to them. Well, let's stay together for a few days. Let's talk this out. And then make sure that you suggest to them you probably need some professional help. Now, a professional suicidologist will know what to do. A psychiatrist will know what to do. And very likely, the psychiatrist will give some medication, I'm not saying a lot, some medication, and work with them personally. They'll do both therapy and medication. The advantage of medication is this, and I know that a lot of people are opposed to medication, but I am not. Because a medication, if it's working well, will not stop you from facing your problems. It'll just make you more comfortable as you're facing your problems, and you can face your problems more easily if you're more comfortable in doing it. The purpose for a psychiatrist to give medication is to make the person comfortable enough that they can look at their lives and they can look at their problems and they can resolve their problems. Without the medication, they might be so uncomfortable, they might be so anxious and so depressed that you don't make any progress. You have to get a person relaxed and trusting you so that they feel free to go into their past and go into the things that are bothering them now so that they can get resolution. But they're not going to do that if they feel too uncomfortable and too nervous and too anxious. So what you're doing with medication is you're calming them down. So then you can go in and help them with it. And I'm a person that doesn't try to force them to talk about things that they're not yet ready to talk about. It can be traumatic to force a person to talk about something that they're not ready to. What I tell them is that I'm not going to force you to talk to me about something you don't want me to know. But my goal is to make them trust me enough and to help them to trust me enough so that they will want to talk to me about these deeper issues. And naturally, as you develop a relationship with a therapist, that should normally happen. It should normally happen that as you trust a therapist, you realize that they're there to help you. They're not manipulating you. They're not just there to take your money. God knows I've seen many people and not charged them a cent just to make sure they got the help that they need. So it's not a money-making racket. It's a kind of making sure that you can enter into a person's life with them and help them and guide them and make sure that they get the help that they need. And oftentimes when I was counseling suicidal people, I also worked with the doctors that they had. As a matter of fact, they would have to sign a contract with me that they would allow me to talk to their doctors, because a lot of times something came up and you have nothing to do. There's no way to help them unless you get the medical treatment that they need. So it gets to be complicated, but people can be helped a whole lot. So we don't have too much time left, so I just want to review. You have to help a person that's suicidal. They will leave clues and cues. You don't depend upon one to tell you that a person is suicidal. You have to look at a total picture. And then if need be, when it comes up naturally, or sometimes if you are really disturbed about it and you think a suicide is imminent, you go to them and you ask them, are you going to hurt yourself? If they say yes, then you know you have to take the appropriate action. Well, let me help you. Let me take you to the doctor. Let me take you to the emergency room. You also contact their relatives. You might even want to contact the police or some kind of a social agency that they might be working at, and you all work together as a team to help this individual. You can't necessarily do it alone without the skills to do it, and so they have to have the professional help. If they say no, they're not going to hurt themselves, then you listen carefully to how they say it. If they're adamant about it, but they're not emotional, and it just seems like a natural conversation, you're probably pretty safe in trusting what they say. However, if they show any agitation or they're angry, and they're first of all, they might be angry that you found out. They didn't want you to find out, so they're angry because now you suspect. So they've left something undone so that you could pick up on it. Or they're not sure that they want to do it, and they're very mentally confused about it. If they're adamant, if they're agitated and they answer the question in a way that's angry provoking, then you have to think that they may not be telling you the truth. Well, we don't have too much time left. I will go more into these clues and cues as we go along, because there are more of them. But you can get a sense of where I'm headed now as I do these suicide classes, because it's a way of prevention. I'm aiming toward the prevention of suicide and the restoration of life. So we'll close it here. And please take down the number for the Veterans Crisis Suicide Hotline, 800-273-8255, and the Domestic Violence Hotline in New Hampshire, 1-866-664-3574. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.